So, good morning, good evening, and good afternoon to you, wherever you might be in the world today. I do hope the week's been kind to you. Over here, everything's fine where I am, no complaints, absolutely. The weather is still actually really quite nice. But anyway, without waffling on too much about the weather, I'm just going to say, look, today I'm going to take it a little bit differently because I've been observing some things happening on YouTube that are actually really good for each one of us to look at perhaps and reflect upon how conflict can arise so very easily with the best of intentions, how we, through the course of our good intentions, can actually escalate these conflicts and create problems for ourselves. You know, we've all turned around and said at different times, I'm sure, as we go through this learning process of life, I'm not sure what I ever did to deserve this. Well, sometimes we do things that inadvertently do create lots of problems for us. So I want to look at that today, or talk about it, and bring in some of my training with social work and the mental health, and because I've got the counselling qualification and that kind of stuff, and just break it down as far as relationship dynamics go. But just a reminder that when I do these videos, I will always put chapters in like this, so you can just jump past content that's not particularly interesting for you, or you can stop and stall and come back, take a look later. If you're not interested in looking at the content on relationship dynamics, you can just jump forward and go down for a channel update. Anyway, it's all there in the description with the timestamp, so you can just click in and out. What else can I say? Just basically the reminder, when we're actively trying to raise our vibration, and we're trying to be spiritual people and be nice people and all of this kind of stuff, a lot of the time the people that we meet and that we have mentors with, they will say to us it's all about the feelings. Now, I want to make the point here and clarify, based on my experiences. Remember, I am a teacher. I teach people how to do Reiki, how to access their psychic gifts and all of these kind of things, that yes, it is true. Feelings are important. They are absolutely vital as part of developing our self-awareness and raising our personal vibration. But the other aspect of that is, we live in a physical body. We have to be able to interact with other people. So it is more than just because we are humans, it is more than just acknowledging our feelings. We have to be able to rationalize those emotions. We have to be able to process them, and we have to be able to make logical decisions that are based on informed decision making, so that we create situations that are basically pleasurable for ourselves. So that's what we're going to be looking at today. Now, before I get into it though, I'm well aware, and something has happened this week that I will just share with you. I'm well aware that you guys in the Northern Hemisphere, you're heading into winter. We're coming out of winter and we're going into summer. And just a reminder that when we're going into winter, as you guys are, your vitamin D can become depleted. Now, the reason I'm mentioning that is quite simply because I've had blood tests done and I'm low in D, and the symptoms of it are actually that you start to get insomnia, you get a bit fatigued, you get a bit emotional, and this kind of thing. So you might need a supplement, is where I'm going. Now, anyway, without further ado, I'm going to explain the scenario of my observations today that we can draw upon my qualifications, if you like, my academic professional skills. So I guess the best way to start the old chitter chatter is to say, life sometimes teaches us really wonderful lessons when we take on that role of being an observer, just sitting back quietly and watching what happens around us. So today, what I'm going to be talking about is, as I said, with the best of intentions, people can create a lot of problems for themselves. And then other times people can create problems without any thought or intention attached to their actions. So what I saw on YouTube, because I do flick around and I watch some of the people on different channels if I've got an interest. But anyway, there was a triangulation of relationships that evolved that created a lot of conflict. And in this particular context, it was even, we could say, more than triangulation. But what I'll do is I'll explain to you what relationship triangulation is, and also what unsolicited advice can result in, because that's the best intention stuff. And I did learn this stuff many years ago as well, but it was also taught to me in an academic context. Anyway, let's just say it's resulted in a huge schmozzle, shall we say, on YouTube between a couple of what people like to call themselves social influencers or channel creators, content creators, is how some of them define themselves. So, in the first instance, what we call relationship triangulation is when two people, because whether it is a YouTube, people talking to each other, whether it's workmates, colleagues, or whatever, when people interact, they have some form of relationship, okay? This is what we talk about. Okay, but when we talk about relationship triangulation, it's when it moves away from being one person speaking to another and there becomes a problem within their relationship and they go outside to seek further advice or support. Now, you will all know or have seen this in different ways. The most simple way of describing this as it might play out in our lives could be you're trying to talk to your child, you're trying to talk to your husband or whatever, wife, whoever, perhaps it's your mother, and you start talking to them and it becomes fractious and they're not listening to you, or certainly they're not hearing what you're saying, and you are starting to get distressed, right? Or it might be vice versa. So what they do is they go outside to a third party and they might have a bleat about how upset they are, or they might ask for support, right? Now, once you bring in that third person, you're talking about a triangulation of the relationship. Now, in the best of cases, relationship triangulation plays out, as I just mentioned, usually within a family situation. Is probably the nicest way because there's normally care, love, and regard within those relationships where even if people's feelings are hurt, even if it gets a little bit fractious and people get upset, there is still a willingness to resolve the conflict in most occasions. And generally, there's not a malice attached to these relationship breakdowns, although it can escalate when there is a communication breakdown. Okay, that's just for consideration. But as I said, look, relationship triangulation can occur in other settings. And when it occurs in other settings, perhaps in the workplace, when there's an unwillingness for people to communicate, because it escalates when there's this communication breakdown and where people will not talk and discuss the problem or how to resolve the problem. So, I mean, sometimes this happens in families as well, where they turn around and go, and that's the end of it, right? I'm not talking about this anymore. That's my position. They're not interested in negotiating a suitable outcome that will accommodate your feelings. That would be a very difficult relationship to manage. So, you would then have to make a decision about whether you want to try and repair that, or if you're prepared to actually accept that relationship as it is. Now, of course, I'm talking about something that's happened on YouTube, so let's look at that now. So, my understanding is that Mr. Blue, this is the way it played out on YouTube, created a video, and in his video, he was quite toxic towards other channel creators. Spreading misinformation. Now, he calls himself an opinion channel, freedom of speech. Obviously, he's American and drawing upon his constitutional freedoms to be able to say what he thinks about other people and scenarios. Now, in this process of him venting his spleen, he made a lot of unsubstantiated allegations toward other channel creators, including a channel that we'll call Miss Pink, because I'm not going to be naming people here. I'm using this scenario as an example. So anyway, he included Miss Pink in these allegations, but what happened was Miss Yellow happened to be there, and she's a subscriber to both channels, and she recognised that what the gentleman, Mr. Blue, was saying about Miss Pink was actually untrue and incorrect. He bagged her together as a bunch of opinion channels, or reaction channels, I think people call them, whereas this is not the scenario of her content. She actually is a creator, and she's also a research, information, if you like, education type channel. And once she's put together her content, then she will give an opinion on it, but she's never, when she does these approaches, she always concludes the video with, "I'm not sure, what do you think? And have I been incomplete in my research," or something like that. "Do I need to look at this a bit further?" I hope you can't hear my dog. He's having a field day at the moment. So either way, Miss Yellow decided to take the high ground, and she actually pointed out to him that he was incorrect in his comments about Miss Pink, and that basically he'd made an error of judgment, that he shouldn't be bagging her in with these other people. So what happened was he then went for Miss Yellow, and he was extremely unpleasant, and it has been now put up, where these people are evidence-based. The people, Miss Pink is saying he was actually very rude and offensive, and she did a screenshot of the content that he typed to Miss Yellow, which included telling her to go forth and procreate in no uncertain words. So I've jumped a little bit ahead there, okay? But where I'm going with this is the initial relationship tension occurred between Mr. Blue and Miss Yellow, because Miss Pink was just sitting around doing a thing, completely unaware of what was going on the other channel, until she received an approach from Miss Yellow, who not only tells her the original, and this is why I've got the duplication here, she doesn't tell her the original blah blah blah, it's not limited to that. She says the blah blah blah, which is that he was talking about you and saying bad things. I'm simplifying this, sorry. But in the process, Miss Pink says Miss Yellow, he said X, Y, and Z to me. So you can see the blah blah blahs has grown. The nature of the offence has grown. Now, I understand, as you would, Miss Yellow being upset at being spoken to the way she was. But there's a but here. The but actually doesn't relate to Miss Yellow saying what she did to Miss Pink, okay? Because what I meant by the but is there's more to this, okay? Miss Yellow now feels better about herself. She's no longer carrying the initial relationship tension, because she has, one, cut off Mr. Blue. She's unsubscribed and she's put him on block. She has been upset, emotionally disturbed. That's the relationship tension. But she has now handed that in the full bag and dice over to Miss Pink to actually work with. Now, I've got to say here, what I think lies behind Mr. Blue's action is actually he's been called out, okay? Somebody must have called him out for his behaviour, and probably called him a gossip, because he actually doesn't create anything. He just talks about media headlines, shall we say. He's got a specific target, and he can be quite volatile and quite toxic, and he would even meet the criteria of being abusive towards the subjects that he's going for, who are public figures, by the way. He's very unfiltered, and his attacks are very personal, okay? So this is kind of a summary. When we talk about a person that's got no filters, who's very aggressive with no respect or regard for other people's feelings, we're talking about a person that has very few boundaries, okay? His behaviour is, I would say, indicative of the schoolyard bully, where he doesn't see that he's crossing a line. So we're talking about a couple of things here. One, there's a boundary issues, and as I say, the behaviour issues. He is a bit of a shock jock. He is a bit of a gossip merchant. And so what I think has happened is somebody has called him out and said, "You're out of line," all right? And he hasn't liked that. And so what he's then attempted to do is deflect attention from himself by doing the "why are you having a go at me? Other people do the same stuff." Well, some people do, but Miss Pink doesn't, okay? So it's been a deflection, it's been a justifying, it's been a refusal to look at his own behaviour, it's a refusal to do some inner reflection and establish, is there substance to these criticisms that have been made. So he's just trying to transfer and deflect the problems of his own behaviour onto other people. Unfortunately, he picked Miss Pink, okay, who is not a gossip channel and who approaches her content from, well, usually she does, I would say, from a rational and emotionally balanced space. And she tries to be fair and just in her portrayals. The way she approaches her content is with a willingness to have an open mind and to be fair to all parties involved. So we would say she takes the mature, emotionally mature high ground normally. And to Miss Pink's credit, initially she did take the moral, emotional, and ethical high ground. She did create the space to reflect. She did give consideration to, are Miss Yellow's allegations true? Is what she claiming founded? Does it have any substance? Is she one of these very emotionally reactive people that's making a mountain out of a molehill? And then it's, well, if these allegations are true, are they harmful to Miss Pink and her channel? Could it result in a loss of subscribers to her and a loss of money for her channel? And then the other thing is, she did reflect, well, why and what motivated Mr. Blue to make these false allegations about her? Because this is where she starts to take it personally. And in fairness, I think most of us would. If we found out somebody was talking badly about us, we would question it and be asking, why is it me? What did I do? Okay, because that would be, in fact, I think, a responsible thing to do. But then she goes on and she gives consideration, well, what can she do to remedy the situation and how will she do it? And in the first instance, she really doesn't know what to do. So she makes the decision and she decides that she's going to be the adult here and she's going to reach out to Mr. Blue directly and ask him, because she went and looked at his channel and she found out that it was actually true what Miss Yellow was saying, and that Miss Yellow actually wasn't dramatising. She was purely relaying. Now, I want to just sort of go back here. I think Miss Yellow actually felt that it was the moral and ethical thing to do to inform Miss Pink of these unsubstantiated allegations against her. And in fairness, I think it's, from my moral position, I also believe it is right. But I'm also aware that you have to be careful with that too. I mean, remember, there's that saying, shoot the messenger, because sometimes people don't want to hear the truth. And what they will do is they will turn on the messenger. But lucky for Miss Yellow, Miss Pink wasn't one of those sort of people. She took on board the information and she processed it and she reached a decision that she felt would be empowering, was mature, and she was going to reach out and speak directly to Mr. Blue. And this, from the observer's perspective, is where it starts to become a little dramatic, and it's like, grab your popcorn, folks, because it's now going to escalate. What she did was she reached out to him, but he had her on block. He stonewalled her, and not only that, he continued to attack her from behind the wall. So he was not responding to her, whilst escalating his venom, shall we say. Miss Pink started to feel completely under attack, and understandable, because she felt that she was being defamed, she was being slandered, and that this most definitely was becoming a scenario that was harmful to her, and she wanted to contact him and get him to cease and desist his behaviour and venom toward her. This is now starting to impact upon her emotionally. Okay, so we now say there's a new relationship tension. The relationship tension was originally between Miss Yellow and Mr. Blue, and now the relationship tension is directly between Mr. Blue, Mr. Pink. Miss Yellow's moved on. Miss Pink's getting really upset, and she is aware she may actually have to start a legal process against him. But there's a few things she hasn't actually considered here, and we'll get to that. So she spends some time in contemplation. It's not that she hasn't thought about this enough, but what's happening is her emotional state is now starting to cloud her vision. She's got her emotional goggles on, and where initially she was able to process her emotions to the point, because there was certain emotional impartiality, shall we say, and make empowering decisions, now this decision making is being impacted negatively. She's made some good conclusions, I might add. She's talking and thinking about, how can I get past this wall and contact this Mr. Blue directly to have him stop this behaviour, this ongoing attack and discreditation of her. And she, incidentally, by the way, she's never met the guy. She hasn't even spoken to him, but she knows that he is friends with a couple of other content creators or opinion pieces. So she believes that it is now time for her to contact these people as a third party. If we're in the workplace, we would say this is a moderator or an arbitrator or whatever, to act as the third person, if you like, to negotiate this conflict. Now, I would say, yes, under most circumstances, that probably would be the right thing, except not in this scenario. And I'll explain to you why. This is because when we bring in negotiators and arbitrators in a formal workplace setting, these people are usually trained to do this. And there is also, when it's workplace bullying or whatever, if people want to keep their jobs, they have to participate. It's not optional. If they don't want to participate in negotiation and arbitration, we've got tight boundaries on this. It's like you will do it or you're down the track. When it comes to YouTube, of course, these people are all independent businesses. They are not obligated to participate in any form of arbitration or negotiation whatsoever with the other creators. Plus, when we're talking about content creators, YouTube is massive and the creators are all over the world. If you've got a community, we usually associate the word community with close surroundings, but you have a YouTube community as well. So this is where there's a bit of an error of judgment. You don't know these people offline, and we only see that aspect of them which they show us on the videos and that kind of stuff. So you really don't know until you come into these situations, as Miss Pink did, how it's going to pan out. But either way, she reached a conclusion. She decided to take the empowerment approach, which is to reach out to these third parties and ask them to intervene and to contact Mr. Blue and to say, please cease and desist, and that she would be looking at legal action if he didn't. Now, while this is a wise and empowering decision in theory, the reality is that the nature of the community, as I just said, is not one that's conducive to a happy resolution here. And the approach that she took was, I'm trying to think of a good word here, perhaps unwise, okay? There were a couple of things she could have done differently, but we'll talk about that in a moment. Let's just say that the first mistake that she made was in believing, or I'm trying to think of the right words, giving these other channel creators too much credit for emotional maturity. She forgot to take into account, and perhaps if she hadn't had her emotional goggles on, she would have stopped and thought that these people are actually all friends because they create the same type of content. They might not be as malicious as Mr. Blue, but I'm going to call them Miss Purple and Miss Blue here as well, right? That their channels are still focused very much on negative stuff. Their channels are funded by creating emotional reactions in people towards their preferred subject matter, shall we say. I'm trying to be a little bit discreet here. So you may as well say they're three peas in a pod, with different levels of flavour. Some's a big fat pea and some's a smaller pea or whatever, but they're all one little group, and they have a different agenda to what she has. So she is actually not part of their group and not part of their community, which she actually has said since then. She doesn't like being called an opinion channel because she considers herself a research channel. And I would say quite rightly so. So the thing is, she is coming from a different headspace to the group, and she hasn't taken into account that these people are emotionally reactive, and I mean all three of them. So to mitigate her relationship tension, Miss Pink's relationship tension with Mr. Blue, she sends off an email we'll call it Miss Blue, and CC's in Miss Purple, okay? Just saying, look, drawing to your attention, I have experienced X, Y, and Z. Mr. Blue is not responding to my emails. she could have, I would have advised her to keep it very, very simple. Just, could you please pass the message along? Because I know that you contact him, that if he does not cease and desist, I will be taking legal action against him. That's all she needed to say. However, Miss Pink is a nice person. She's a kind person, from what I can tell, and she's a caring person. So she took it a little bit further there. She gave more information than was necessary. She's got a little bit of foresight, okay? And, because she's a logical, rational person. The bottom line is, when you have toxic creators who thrive on creating distress for other people, and clearly when a channel creator will tell one of their subscribers to F off and go into the sunset, they are going to lose membership. People will unsubscribe. So Miss Pink, with her best of intentions, says to these two ladies that she draws to their attention. I know he's a friend of yours, and I understand that you helped him to build his platform, but I have concerns that his behaviour is going to reflect upon your own subscriber membership, okay? Which is a valid concern, but it is unsolicited advice. They didn't ask for it. They don't know her. They don't know her agenda. Clearly, all three of them hang around with a bunch of, you may as well say, people that are into creating drama and emotional manipulation. So, of course, they perceive her care and concern email to be a form of emotional manipulation, shall we say. So they react. They are reactor channels, and they reacted badly. So I'm very sorry, I've had to stop and start this video for whatever reasons I'm not going to get into now, but I'm hoping that the tone and voice and that kind of stuff is not too different from the previous slides, and rather than re-record everything that I've done, I'll just carry on from where I'm at and say, thank you for your patience. Okay, so getting back to the content here, I like to refer to it as emotional goggles, all right? These two women haven't perceived Miss Pink's words to be words of concern, but rather they have interpreted her words as being dictatorial, manipulative, and attempts to control them, and in fact, even to pit one person against the other, which is actually referred to as relationship splitting. Now, none of them have actually bothered to respond to the emails sent by Miss Pink. They certainly haven't attempted to ensure that the way they're interpreting or understanding her words is actually based on truth, or that perhaps they've taken the meaning out of context or whatever. They have simply chosen to react to her comments. In a perfect world, we would like to think that they would ask the questions, certainly out of the public eye, but of course that's too much to ask for in this particular instance. They're all now wearing their emotional goggles, okay? Their brain is not dictating their course of action, or certainly what I would say back in the day, if you've looked at these other videos that I've got up about understanding the way we think in crisis and that kind of stuff, we would call it, they're in the brainstem. They're not thinking logically and rationally. They are coming from the brainstem, from that fight, flight, fear reflex, okay? Instead of coming from the frontal lobe is what we talk about. So when I talk about them having emotions, I'm not talking about these love-based emotions. I'm talking about the fear-based ones, because this is about self-preservation, and all of their actions are now being determined by their fears, because they're not thinking of the long-term consequences. So you've got three on one side of the wall that are fanning the flames of each other's anger, and making assumptions about the intention of Miss Pink, who they haven't spoken to, and consequently they made the decision impulsively and reactively to do lives where they publicly and indirectly and directly, I believe, attacked who we would call Miss Pink. And this was an effort for them in the process of their lives. They were trying to defend Mr. Blue, and in the process they further defamed Miss Pink because they made assumptions about her agenda and her motives, and applied labels and beliefs that once again compounded defamation towards her, unsubstantiated allegations at least. A grave, grave mistake by these three, because what they forgot is that Miss Pink is not a reaction channel. She is a justice exposure of the truth. She is a truth telling channel where she does research, she puts together information and she presents it. So what they did, and this is how it played out, okay, was they lobbed a few extra bombs over the wall to her. They're behind the wall because they're not communicating with her, but they're throwing grenades over at her of allegations, assumption, false information, if you like, and sharing this information with the public, which of course leads to feelings by Miss Pink that she's being further defamed, slandered even, and all of these kind of ugly things. So their little bombs that they were throwing over the fence at her ended up fanning the flames, and she became consumed with anger and she had her own reaction. However, Miss Pink, being generally speaking for the best part, she's a rational and logical person. When she did her right to respond, what she did was she created a video and she put together all the evidence, highlighting the inconsistencies, what she considered to be distortions of the truth, and which would appear to be distortions of the truth by these other parties. So basically what she did was she has named and shamed them. She's exposed them publicly. So from a moral and ethical perspective, there's no issue with this. This is about a moral right, if not a legal right, but certainly I don't think she's broken any laws when she's done her public exposure of these people. However, there's a big question mark here. However, she may not have been aware of the consequences to her own new actions with her right to respond. I'm aware that she did actually put up in one video before she went as far as doing the public response to them, where she's named and shamed them, that she did put it to her own subscribers saying, asking their opinions on how she should approach this problem. She didn't name or shame them at this point when she was asking the question. She was just exploring, I guess, the moral values of her subscribers before she made her decision to publicly expose them. Now, just so you know, when she did this live where she named and shamed them, to some extent she actually fulfilled the prophecy that she gave them in an email when she said, she was concerned for them that if they continued to align themselves with the values and behaviour and conduct of Mr. Blue, that it may impact negatively on their channel. Well, once she exposed them, it certainly will have, because in the comments under the video that I happened to see, there was all these people turning around and saying, I've unsubscribed from them because they felt that it was unethical behaviour, there was a lack of integrity and all of this kind of stuff, right? But to be clear here, she got a lot of support with this. There were a handful of comments, including my own, recommending that Miss Pink now put that ball down and let it go. Okay, that she has now addressed the problem. She's done her right to respond. She might be right. She might be right to take this stand and to try and address it. But unless she's able to refocus her attention back on her channel content, there will potentially be more conflict and more escalations, and it will get worse and worse. And I'll explain to you why. Basically, the reason why I would advise this is because if we don't do it, it doesn't matter if we're right, okay? Because we enter into, at the very least, a game of verbal ping pong or tennis. And I was taught this many years ago because so I'm doing a bit of a disclosure here. I was in a relationship with somebody that was very good at deflecting and telling me what I needed to do, which definitely wasn't stuff that I needed to do, but they would wrap it up with a little, you know what you need to do? You need to get organised because you would be a much happier person. We'll use something pathetic like this. You would be a much happier person if you were more organised and structured. And it was like, well, no, I'm happy as I am, thank you. I don't really feel the need to be organised and structured. Because there is method in my madness, which actually is quite true. This is the way I work and always have. And I do have method, but it's not always apparent to everybody else. But anyway, where I'm going with this is, upon reflection, I was able to realise that actually the person I was with was very methodical, very resistant to change, and they needed to have structure there. And so, therefore, my choice was I could continue in my own method, in my madness, or I could accommodate their needs and try and be a little bit more structured and organized so that they didn't experience greater anxiety, shall we say. So I would throw that ball back at them and I would say to them, well, actually, you know what? I don't actually feel the need to change, but I do understand that this is important for you to feel comfortable, and I'm happy to make the changes so that you feel better about yourself. Well, anyway, suffice to say, that would lead to another ball being lobbed at me, which is, I didn't take criticism or whatever. So the ball goes back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And something that's really a small request can become really big and bigger than Ben-Hur. So what will happen, what I predict will happen just on the nature of behaviour, is that if Miss Pink continues to inform people publicly about what is going on with the dynamics between the channel creators, not only is it going to be back and forth and it's going to continue to escalate, even though she's clearly in the right here, there is other considerations and risks for her that may become harmful for her if she enters into this game of verbal ping pong. So it was put to me many years ago that even if you're right, sometimes you've just got to put the ball down and walk away from the game. And this would be what probably is the best advice to Miss Pink at this point in time. And the bottom line is, if their behaviour goes unchecked on their channels and they keep maligning and slandering her, then she may have to, in fact, if she was able to emotionally withdraw from this and look at it through logical and rational eyes, then she'll find other solutions that are not as emotionally disturbing to her. And that might be to get a lawyer. It could be, I don't know, any other option. This would be something for her to consider. What are her options where she can step away from this problem, no longer emotionally invest in the outcome of it, but retain the moral high ground, shall we say. And if there is a need for justice, to take it through the appropriate justice channels, literally off YouTube. So my unsolicited advice for Miss Pink at this point in time would be actually to do that stepping back. As I said, put the ball down, now do another reflection and to do a risk management situation, because this is about her future livelihood, if you like. She's got a channel that she makes money from. So it's about asking herself some questions and how she's going to manage these, should these people continue defaming her publicly, obviously what her options are. And I did allude to that just before. Now, I do understand she has taken some proactive actions in between times. She's now put the wall firmly in place. And I understand that at least one of the ladies is reaching out to her, trying to resolve the conflict and behind the wall. But of course, Miss Pink has now stepped into the too little too late. I'm not going to be having this conversation with you. Now, the reason why I say a risk assessment is important is not just because of what's going on between these channel creators, but also about what might be the potential implications for Miss Pink through her own actions from this point onwards. Because the reality is, this is just a great big drama. This is a case of not my circus, not my monkeys for the viewers. So such as myself, I've watched the video. If I think she's going to put up another video now about this conflict, then I just won't be watching it because I can't be bothered. I don't have enough hours in my day to get drawn and sucked into somebody else's conflict. It all sounds a little bit like schoolyard bullying, if you ask me. So the reality of this is that if she continues to bring this into the public forum, she will end up fulfilling the prophecy about the other channel creators for herself as well, which is she'll lose subscribers because people just aren't interested in that kind of stuff. So I'm speaking for myself here. We visit her channel because it's interesting and it's informative, and she is what we would call a critical assessor when it comes to the information provision. It's an interesting channel for those that want to open their mind up and learn to think. I think it's called thinking laterally or whatever. So she adds value in different ways. But if she deviates and goes down a pathway of emotional reaction, those of us that are looking for her original content, we will withdraw. And the other thing too is that at this point in time, because she's dealing with people that are not as logical or rational as what she is, I'm trying to think of a way to lead into this. She's now at risk of anything that she says will be used against her by the other three, who are now in the process of forming a mob, if you like. If we were in a workplace and you've got three people pitted against one, we would call that workplace bullying or mobbing. Okay, so what she's at risk of in this scenario is being mobbed by other people who are really cross and angry with her because she's actually exposed them. Now, this leads me into something else. It would have been very helpful for Miss Pink if she was familiar with this kind of information before she entered into this whole conflict situation, shall we say. If she had considered this content about emotional intelligence before she went public and did her live, okay? Now, I've done videos about emotional intelligence, and I'm going to put the links in the descriptions because this is a really important subject going forward, not actually particularly for YouTube, but for all of us if we are working or interacting with people in our family unit, our friendship circles, or whatever. But to be clear here, emotional intelligence is now perceived to be more valuable by employers than intellectual intelligence, shall we say. And this is because, of course, if people are of lower EI, emotional intelligence is called lower EI, or higher, lower and higher EI. I'm stumbling over my words. Sorry about that. I've put this graphic up that kind of revisits content that I've previously put up. Anyway, if Miss Pink had known about this, she would have been able to recognise that based on her conduct and behaviour prior to this escalation, I would have put her at stage 4 of EI. Now, when we talk about a tribe and find your tribe, she's going to be comfortable with people that behave in the detailed way. They're precise, they're meticulous, they're careful, they're very systematic and neat, they're patient, stable, predictable, consistent, and they're good listeners, okay? So on that lower level that I've got on the screen here, we've got the attributes of a person with higher IQ, higher EI, as I stumble again over my words. What I'm trying to demonstrate here is to show that when it comes to emotional intelligence, people with a high EI, they are not emotionally reactive, okay? People of lower EI are. Now, when we look at, I've broken it down into stages here as well. So you can see on the line, perhaps for the lower EI, Mr. Red, well, we'll call it the red person, the lowest of low of EI is a person that is aggressive, demanding, egotistical, bossy. They enjoy confrontation. The next stage is somebody, okay, they might not be as aggressive as the person in stage 1, but they're certainly a bit selfish, a bit self-absorbed, poor listeners. They tend to be impulsive and they find it difficult to focus. They're very easily distracted, and so on and so on. So when we look at stage 3 of the lower end of EI, we're looking at somebody who's resistant to change, who doesn't respond. They can be slow to respond, but they're certainly very stubborn. And when we put passive, there's a passive and aggressive aspect to this. So they'll kind of ignore problems instead of acting on them. Okay, then, so I'll just skip on from this, and then you can see the traits on the lower line of what a person with higher EI is going to behave like up until you get to this blue aspect. So blue's the high end and red's the low end. Okay, so what she would have recognised right from the beginning, if she was aware of this information, was that she is somewhere, I would say, actually, my assessment, based on what I've observed, would be that she's probably a 3.5 because she allowed her emotions to get the better of her throughout this conflict. She lost her patience, actually, and that's where it kind of went a bit pear for her. When she lost her patience, she also became emotionally reactive. But she's still quite a highly intelligent person when it comes to emotions, whereas the initial person, Mr. Blue, he's stage 1, you know. He's right down there. They are poles apart, and responding to him in any way, shape, or form actually is a waste of time and energy. She's given the other ladies a little bit too much credit. I would put them down to at least stage 2, or at worst stage 2, maybe stage 3. But we can still see that they're poles apart on an emotional intelligence perspective. So while she sent her email, which was based in care and concern, and had a certain amount of compassion towards the two women, she actually might have realised, had she known this content and known the research evidence, that she was actually wasting her time, that some people need to learn from their own mistakes. And in this instance, the research evidence says that if you are trying to help somebody, a person in stage 1 is not going to be receptive to support offered to them from a person of higher EI, that's stage 4. They will generally only accept support, help, and commentary from a person that's in stage 2. And equally, a person that's in stage 2 is not going to accept help from stage 4. They will take it only from a stage 3. So if you're trying to bring somebody upwards through their emotional processing and intelligence, the evidence suggests that you can only do it one stage at a time. But what I can say is, based on my observations, what I have seen, it does appear to me that when it comes to the two ladies, one might be stage 2, which is why she gets on so well with the guy in stage 1, yet one of the ladies is probably leaning towards stage 3, because I understand now that she's trying to reach out and she's more receptive to a contact with Miss Pink. But unfortunately for her, Miss Pink has kind of done, no, you've done your dash. Miss Pink's not taking any communications from her, I understand, going forward. So as usual, I tend to get off on my tangent and run away with myself as well, and get a bit distracted. So this video is getting very long. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about this slide. Suffice to say that when we talk about tension, we're also talking about psychological distress and the feelings of people, their needs. Everybody needs to feel safe, okay? Now, the problem is that when people feel psychologically unsafe or emotionally unsafe, they can react and really lash out at those people around them. But I thought, I'm going to put on here, once again, based on my observation, so I can't make any formal clinical diagnoses or anything like that. And I certainly know from my training in social work that we are ill-advised to make a diagnosis of a person in a random way. But what I've done is, if we were going to diagnose these people, we would be looking at more than these cognitive flaws that I've put up here. And when we talk about cognitive flaws, we're talking about problems with thinking. So with Mr. Blue, what I've identified is that he is unfiltered with his mouth. Apparently that might be due to alcohol, I'm not sure. That was one of the things that was said by one of the commenters. He's clearly got low impulse control, because he'll just go out there and say it. He clearly has poor boundaries, because he actually has no capacity to see the boundaries and to be able to moderate his behaviour. And also, he doesn't take responsibility for his actions or his behaviours. He will deflect. So my questions there would be, does he have an undiagnosed behavioural disorder? Narcissism is a word that's overused, as is sociopathy in this day and age. And quite often people will lump borderline personality disorder in there. I question whether or not perhaps he does. I don't know. I don't know enough, but I question it. Okay, when it comes to the two ladies, there are some cognitive flaws there, or within the industry that I've worked in, it's often called maladaptive thinking processes. So we've got the assumptions, the jumping to conclusions, the crystal ball gazing, where they presume that X and Y means this and this is what's going to happen. This business of taking things personally, and then the emotional regulation. It appears to be there's a bit of a barrier there as well. Now, this can also be indicative of their own traumas, if you like. They might have PTSD, because these are symptoms of that. They might have social or anxiety disorders. it could also even be borderline personality disorder there as well. Either way, there's some maladaptive thinking there that they could work on. As for Miss Pink, she does have a couple of cognitive flaws. And I want to say, look, I'm not passing judgment, because at the end of the day, I've got my own cognitive flaws as well, I'm sure. She does, I did observe that she did seek the approval of the subscribers. She did make justification. She felt the need to justify. She's so fixated on justice and exposing injustice. This is in general, this is why I say these people pick the wrong person to actually target there, because her nature, based on her content, is about justice, social justice and legal justice and all the rest of it. Does she have emotional regulation problems? Well, I don't think a lot. Okay, this is just my opinion. I think most people in her situation would become emotional and upset. So I wouldn't say that she has an emotional regulation problem, but I do question, not because of her emotional reaction, I've got to say, but because of her response and this fixation on justice, whether or not she might have what we call complex PTSD or what we call a moral injury, because there becomes a fixation on justice when you've got those kind of conditions. And certainly anxiety as well, if she's worrying about the future impacts on her channel by these people and by this defamation. But I just want to point out here as well, in Miss Pink's defence, and maybe I'm a tad biased, I actually get the feeling, based on the way she has dealt with this stuff, that she's actually, if she does have these conditions, that she manages it for the best part. She may have been triggered by Mr. Blue, but at the end of the day, I would be very surprised if Miss Pink hasn't actually had therapy or a lot of training around, around managing her own mental health. I actually forgot to mention something here as well. When it comes to tribes, it also includes having a set of social skills. I am going to put up some reels. I saw when I was preparing for this video that I haven't published a couple of short reels in regard to Find Your Tribe, and I will do that over the next week. So just really quickly, because the video is so long, how does this actually relate to me, and where did I find within this whole demonstration of conflict that I could relate to and take meaning from this scenario? And to be quite honest, it was because I believe that what started all of this explosion, there was the problem with Mr. Blue in the first place, but the explosion started through the misguided, well-intentioned actions of Miss Pink by giving unsolicited advice. She tried to help and it backfired, okay? Now, people have to be open and receptive to receiving advice, and this is one of the things that I've got myself into trouble with a lot, and this is because I'm open to hearing other people's opinions, thoughts and beliefs, and to weigh them up and consider whether or not I want to take them on board. Now, just because I think like that, I have to remind myself not everybody is like that, okay? Some people are not willing to receive information unless it's been asked for. And if it hasn't been asked for, then it's unsolicited advice, okay? So this is where, for me, I actually had a recent experience, and I'm actually happy to say that I picked up on the signs very quickly and I was able to shut myself down, okay? So a lady shared with me something that she's doing. It's an activity, and automatically, because I have experience in that field, my assumption, or well, I shouldn't say my assumption, my inherent behavior and character led me to offer a suggestion to her. And it was a suggestion of help, which she declined immediately. Now, sometimes people are reluctant to say yes or thank you when they're offered help, okay? I'm one of them. I struggle with that sometimes too. So either way, sillily, I fell back on past behaviours, and we spoke a bit more, and I rephrased the offer. I offered again. I think I actually offered her 3 times. And then I realised I needed to stop Okay. Not only had she said no the first time, I had actually pushed her an extra 2 times where she had to say no to me. So I didn't respect her boundaries. When she said no to me, she said no. I should have let it go. Okay. I wasn't asked for help, even though what I could have given her was helpful and she probably would have benefited from it. She was not receptive to the information, and I have to respect that. And this is the same with all of us, we have to be able to respect it. But historically, where I might have got myself into trouble, well, in fact, I shouldn't say might, where I definitely have, has actually been one, not respecting the boundaries, and two, definitely offering thoughts, ideas, and opinions to people that are not receptive and who will personalize that offer of assistance to be what, as with these ladies, that it is a slight or an insult against them, that I must be saying there's something wrong with them because I'm offering help to them. They will make an assumption that I think I'm better than them, or that I think I know better than them, or whatever, and then they can become quite aggressive in their response. So, little tip there that I still try and practice is, if somebody is not receptive, if they haven't asked you for advice, be very careful when you offer it, and certainly pay attention not just to their mouth but to their body language, and respect their boundaries. So, as far as the channel update goes, the bottom line is I've loaded the buying tips video, and of course I invite you to share information or recommend retailers or somebody that you know or believe to be reputable. Now, I recognise as well that this may invite scammers to actually turn around and say, oh, yes, these ones are good. So I'm not going to be seen to be endorsing any of them. I just invite you to put the information up, and at the same time, for other people that watch the video or read the comments, just be aware. Just because it's up there doesn't make it a good one. If I can speak properly, carry out your own research would be my recommendation, especially if the selling is online, okay? Because I must admit that I am actually at this stage of saying I really am becoming quite anti-online selling, simply because, especially when it comes to selling crystals, I much prefer to actually go into a facility and hold the crystal in my hand and actually get a feeling for it and about the crystal. But, we do what we've got to do. We make do with what we've got. You will also have noticed that the Crystal Care, the storage, has been loaded. And of course, when I give tips and information, it's not conclusive. There's always more, okay? I just give the information that comes to mind at the times I'm making the videos, and you might have different methods and techniques and strategies, or more information that basically we can all learn from. So once again, I invite you to share your tips. The next video in the series, which will go up next week, will be about how to attune and program your crystal to make it ready for use. Hopefully that will be something that you enjoy, and then from there I will go into the specific crystal content, talking about specific crystals. If you've got a preference, let me know where you want to start. I have some content that I can draw upon where I've been putting information together for a long time in preparation just for sharing the information. So there's some I can start with already, but if you've got a preference, absolutely let me know and I'm happy to accommodate. I have worked out a way around the copyright issues, and so I'm happy with that. But also at the same time, the invitation for you to send through photographs to me for me to look at or discuss further with you in a public forum, I'm happy to do that. So the Reiki stuff is still coming together, because clearly I've distracted myself with the crystal content, and I don't feel any great pressure to be working on doing the Reiki content, and it won't take me much once I get back to it anyway. The bottom line though, and I thought I would share this with you, is that we can actually be aware of all of this content, or all of the information, or if not all of it, a lot of it. We can be privy to it and to know how to direct and send healing and ideally we can do healing for ourselves and we don't need to go outside, blah, 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 all of that stuff. But the bottom line is sometimes we're too attached to the outcome and we actually need to go outside and get somebody else to do the healing for us. And basically that's the scenario that I'm at. I've been struggling for some time now with some health issues, including fatigue and this kind of thing. I think I said to you, I've become aware that I've actually got a vitamin D deficiency, despite the fact that I live in Australia. So where I'm going with this is I've actually spoken to somebody and asked them to send me some healing, and I'm at the stage of actually going out to just get myself boosted and back on track and try and overcome this fatigue. Just a reminder, of course, before I close out for the day, that we have a number of channel playlists now that you can go and look at. If there's a subject or content that particularly interests you, feel free to go and have a look through them, okay? I also have, if you're new to the channel, you might not be aware of it up until you've seen today's content, where I talk about emotional and psychological health and well-being, drawing upon all of these dramas that are happening with the channels. I do also have the qualifications in social work and counselling. So I've got some mainstream self-help content loaded on, I think it's the self-care. I think I've called it self-care, that playlist, but it's health and well-being. So, I do apologise for the length of this video, considering it's a yarning session, and I'm going to close it up, wind it up here. Once again, inviting you to put forward your viewpoints, thoughts, opinions, questions, how you might manage things. I'm always open to feedback, like I say. There is nothing negative for me. As far as I'm concerned, all feedback is good feedback, even if it's critical. I just want to say for now, though, love you, leave you. Thank you for being part of my journey. Thank you for being part of my life, my day. Take care. I'll catch you on the next video. Bye-bye for now.